to build a Django REST API. It has been a long time since I haven't done this, so I'm not really sure how long it's gonna take me. I think I'm gonna build something simple first. Like the difficult part about doing this on stream is that I remember that if I want to set up the database, it can be quite annoying and confusing. And also I don't want to leak anything because then I will have to redo everything again. So I remember for setting up the Postgres database, I have to download other stuff. And it's kind of annoying to set everything up. So I don't think I'm going to do that now. And I'm probably not going to need a database for some time. I think I'm just going to store the projects. Well, for the projects, I'm not going to use database at all, I think. I'm just going to store them here. And the only reason why I would need a database would be to sign up users or to have other stuff like that, which I'm not really sure if I'm going to do with this API or with another one. So for this API, I'm thinking about, I want to build an IDE. I'm not really sure about it, to be honest. I'm going to put some music here. I don't know which direction to go because there's so many things in my mind, but for now at least, I think I'm going to try to build something like GitHub has. So let me go in a project. Or just something like Code Sandbox also has, like this structure here. And then I realized, I was thinking about this yesterday, I think, or 2 days ago. And I realized that every time you click here, it navigates to a new page. So I couldn't find any place that showed like how to do this exactly the way that it is. There's a bunch of stuff about code editors, but not, which I also found the code editor for VS Code, which is Monaco editor, I think. I was using Code Mirror for the other one, the other page that I was doing, so I'm not really sure if I'm gonna... the editor thing is gonna be complicated, I think, because... So the idea that I have at the beginning is to just create a folder and file structure first, and then just display whatever exists on the file instead of like just display the text instead of allowing people to edit. And I want to avoid, I think in the beginning, but maybe not, I'm not 100% sure because I'm not that knowledgeable on sandboxing the user, and I want to avoid having to study about all the security things. I think I have a decent idea for now. I can just limit a lot the libraries that people are going to use and stuff like that, but it's still kind of annoying and more risk. So I think the idea is just going to be to try to create this folder structure here, and then display whatever exists on the file. So this is it seems like it is open source. I think it has the MIT license. So I might, instead of using Code Mirror later on, I might try to use this one. I remember it was very complicated to set up the editor though, so if it takes a lot of time, then I'm just gonna go with the setup that I already have. But I still had to figure out some stuff about the setup that I had, so that it looks like, because there's a lot of functionality that you don't think about on the editor. Like VS Code has auto-completion, stuff like that, different syntaxes for different languages, and extensions as well, so it gets like extremely complicated real fast. So the idea that I have for now is just to try to create something that I create some endpoints here, and then it sends back, like I make a request and then it sends back the folder structure for a project. I think I'm gonna start with the... let me open this. I'm gonna try to copy the pandas project that I have here. And this is something kind of annoying about Django, is that like you start the project with this command here, then it creates 2 folders with the same name, which is kind of confusing, and then you have to use another command. I was just looking at the course that I went through a while ago to remember, and then you do this start app to create another folder that is going to be the project. So as far as I remember, the setting says everything that you need to set up, like the name says, the project. Oh fuck, maybe I'm gonna have to change this. Fuck it. So I think maybe I just do the code. I'm gonna keep it on localhost. Obviously I'm gonna use environment variables later on. So I think I'm just gonna keep this one on localhost, and then I just copy the code for another project, just redo everything and change the, so I changed the secret key. And then once it gets time to deploy, I have the new one, but whatever. So the way that I remember is that you have this URLs here, and the URLs determine, it's kind of confusing as well, because you have to put two different URLs, one in the project and one comes with the command. And I think it just set up the endpoints. So you use the path here from this library, and then you pass whatever the pattern is gonna be. So in this case, it's gonna be localhost 8000/API. The admin comes with the site, which is a page you have that you can, it's for the owner of the site to manage the site, which is very nice. And also you have to create a password for this as well. I have to remember everything. I'm gonna have to look at the documentation. But then you include here whatever file you have from the app, I think. So this is the name of the app and then the URL. So it's just the path to the file is this one, and then it's going to include all this, the paths you put here. I think here I probably don't need this because it's already going to put, so whatever you put here is going to go after API, I think. So like these are the main entry points, and probably the way that is done this way is because you can have multiple different projects or apps inside of one project. So that way it would allow you to put like different base endpoints here, and then for each app you have other patterns that come after. So URLs is for the URLs, the models are for the database. So here I think you can import a bunch of things, and you create classes, and then the classes are gonna have the models. So this works with a database where it's gonna pass everything to the, you specify how you want to structure the database here. There's a bunch of different baselines, I think. And then depending on which database you're gonna use, I think it changes what libraries you use. I don't remember really well. I'll have to remember everything. Yeah, but like I said, I'm not gonna use databases for now. And the views is just the entry points. So when you make a request, you make a request to the view, and then it triggers the function that you make the request to. Which I also don't remember really well. I think you put on the URLs. Yeah, here. So you specify the path, and you specify what function is gonna be called by the path. So in this case, would go, if you go to localhost 8000/API, which is the one you have here, and this is just a home, like it's just the entry point. So if there is no pattern after API, then it's just gonna call this function here. So you specify whatever function you wanna call, and then I think the name is just for yourself to identify, or maybe you could do some functionality. And then it's gonna run whatever functionality you have for the function you put here. So you're gonna receive the information from the request, whatever you making the request from, and then you create the logic based on this information, and then you send the response using this library here. It's gonna convert everything into JSON, I think. I'm not really sure, I don't remember really well. And the other thing is just the manage.py is the file that handles everything. So you can run everything from the manage.py. And depending on which settings you have, it's gonna structure. But I knew like these kinds of things are annoying because then I have to like it's very easy to leak stuff because I don't remember really well how everything works. So I'm probably gonna just structure everything and then I just run this again. I'll delete the files and then create everything again for a different key. Or I create another project and just copy the key to this one. It's probably a good idea. And then if you're gonna use Django to serve things, then I remember you have to put some stuff here, I think, on the templates. Because the templates are the things that, if you wanna display like HTML, use this stuff, but for my case, it's not gonna be necessary. And then there's a bunch of annoying things about the database as well. And authentication is annoying as well. So I think the first thing that I wanna do, let me think about this. You should probably create another folder, another file into here, and just separate the next steps from both of them. The other thing that I realized is that on the other project, I finally understand why tests are good, which I don't know why I didn't see this case before. But like the reason I have high resistance towards doing tests is because I don't want to do tests just for the sake of doing tests. So from before I couldn't find anyone that explains like very well with an actual example, like what is the main benefit of having a test. Because in my mind I was thinking like if I can make the test, then I know what the thing is gonna be testing for. So like it's kind of a paradoxical thing. Because obviously, if you can think about the task, then you can solve the stuff that task is testing for. So it didn't make a lot of sense to me. So the only reason why it made sense is that if you're working on a large team or if you're doing a large project, the purpose of the function of the task is to allow synchronization between people. So for that standpoint, it makes sense. But right now, I think I finally understand, which is just like I had some problems with the graph, and the reason why is because every time that I have to change something, I have to change a bunch of stuff on the graph. I have to test a bunch of stuff on the graph. So if I change a functionality or something that is related to the graph, then I have to check if the animations are still working and if the layouts are still working, if the physics engine is still working. So there's several different things that are related to the visualization. And the purpose of the task is just to allow you to automate the process, which makes a lot of sense, but I don't know why I didn't think about it like this way before. I think it's just because I didn't have any like actual examples of when it is actually useful. And the thing is that I know everything, like this stuff that the task will task for, but it's easy to forget when you change something. So I had a problem with the layouts, for example, and it's not that I don't know how to test for the layouts, it's just that I forgot. I changed something and then I forgot that it might affect something else. And also because I have two different pages, which have two different things, and also there's several different things like with the arrows and the coloring of everything. So this is another stuff that I'm gonna have to think about. But I think I'm gonna think about this later on. And obviously I was able to figure everything out for now, so. Yeah, but now what I wanna do is just make a component and then put the components on the side, on the visualization to create the graph, the tree data structure from the folders. So the way that I'm thinking about doing this is just to make a request. The annoying thing is the React router. I don't like it very much, the way that it is. The Next.js one is a lot better, but I'm using Vite. And I set up everything based on the documentation, and it's kind of annoying. Like, it's one of those things that is not really fun to think about. It's just annoying as hell to figure out. So the way that I want to figure out that I'm imagining this is that like I'm gonna have probably yeah, I'm gonna have to think a lot about. This is something else that I was thinking, is that I was looking into other websites to get an idea of what kind of stuff, what kind of things I can do to make the website look more legit. But then, like, after looking at a couple of websites, I realized that a lot of them just put a bunch of stuff that is not useful at all. It's just to, like, to give the impression that the website is legit. But if you look deeper, like, there isn't anything fundamental that's this stuff, like, it doesn't add like a lot of value. It's just there to, like, give the impression that is legit. And I think I'm gonna try to avoid this as much as possible. I think probably the best philosophy is just Occam's razor. You just add complexity whenever you think is necessary, and you try as best as you can to simplify as much as possible. That's the kind of the philosophy I want to go with. So only when I add stuff if it's actually necessary, and I want to avoid putting garbage as much as possible. Just leave, like, clean. But obviously it's going to be inevitable. There's going to be a lot of complexity, and this is another feedback that I got from the demo day in Buildspace, is that people told me that it's already very complicated to understand everything that is going on here, because there's a lot of buttons. And I was thinking in my mind, like, if they think that's complicated now, like, it's gonna get exponentially more complicated than this, because I'm gonna add, like, a bunch of different stuff. So this is a big challenge that I have, which is to find a balance between, because you wanna, like, the complexity has to be hidden and you can't avoid it. So there's a nice balance between, like, allowing people to get used to the thing without overwhelming them with a bunch of buttons right away. So, which is gonna be one of those things where, like, everything works from this principle. It's just a relative symmetry. So we're always gonna have two different boundaries, and the answer to the thing is gonna be infinite complexity, which is gonna be related to whatever you're trying to do. It's just a consequence of the complexity of the environment which your thing is gonna work well. And the evolution of your thing, which is the evolution of time itself, is going to be the connection or the relationship between these relative symmetries that is going to create a multifractal structure. So here, like, this exemplification of this is that you have one extreme where I don't put any buttons at all, but then it sucks because people can't customize. And the other extreme is that I just put a bunch of buttons and options everywhere, and then people get overwhelmed because there's too much thing to do. So I have to find the balance where I'm exposing some options, and then from those options, it gradually unlocks complexity as they put the buttons. So I have to operate thinking about that, like, in the back of my mind. So, for example, one thing here, like, I think that, to be honest, I think that what I have right now is not that bad when it comes to complexity. I think it's fine. Because, like, this stuff here comes from VGS, so, like, but maybe I could just, like, remove some of the options here. But I honestly think it's fine. It doesn't matter that much. One thing that the problem with doing, like, showing like this instead of as the default instead of this, is that then some people might not like, see that you can have the option. But I think for now it's probably good the way that it is. I'm gonna try to go, like, the way that I'm thinking about, because I think it's not that bad. I think this, but maybe the options here can be, because some of them are kind of useless as well. Maybe I remove the max velocity and min velocity. From my experience of using VGS, I never found a situation where I wanted to use these things here. And the purpose of this is for determining when the graph is gonna stabilize, I think. So, and also the time step here, maybe. But I think it's not that big of a deal. And the problem I had was on the layout, that I changed some stuff on the graph, and then the layout was returning undefined because it was depending on a data structure that wasn't working anymore. I think it was because of the node IDs and edge IDs, which I changed from a string to an integer, and I think that's the case, but I'm not really sure. It was breaking the layouts, and I didn't realize because I forgot to shoot test. So And this is another thing is that not only I have this page, but I have this other page here as well. So on this one, there was also some problems, and there still are, but I'm not gonna focus on them now because it doesn't matter that much. But it's with which is a very hard thing to think about, which is like because I'm giving the option to highlight the nodes, then it fucks up some visualizations because some visualizations will be dependent on the highlighting of the nodes. So if I put an animation or some events that trigger some animation, then it's gonna depend on the color, and if they like highlight the nodes, it's gonna mess up the animation. So here, for example, it breaks now. I can't highlight. And the reason why was because of the way that I did the function there, which is an annoying thing about 3GS, which is like I'm creating the animation in the beginning using a hex color, and for the text, they accept a hex color, but for the 3GS class, it accepts a RGB object. And it's not a standard RGB object, it goes from 0 to 1, so it's more like a percentage, instead of going from 0 to 255. So it's kind of annoying because then I have to keep in mind, like, because on the other customizations, it changes the color from hex to RGB. Otherwise, it wouldn't work with the thing. So initially I have hex, then I change to RGB, but then I have to think about like the functionality, what's gonna happen. So it gets very complicated. But doing the test is gonna be annoying as hell as well, I think, because it's not a standard thing should do, I imagine. So yeah, usually I think people are gonna test for different routes or different data being served, but I'm gonna have I assume it's gonna be hard because it's gonna be hard to look into the documentation and look at exactly what functions I have to use. But yeah, the idea that I have for now is that I'm gonna have some tabs here. I'm thinking about creating another layer here where I create call languages instead of Python. But this is the thing, is I'm not really sure, because maybe it's better to focus on only one thing first, which is gonna be Python, I think, because there's a lot of stuff for JavaScript as already, but for Python there isn't much, I think. So it's probably better, and Python is the easiest one. So if I put the languages there, it might make me lose track of like focusing only on one thing. So it is challenging because I have, in a way, I think I have to think about this now, because if I'm gonna do that later on, then I might change fundamentally everything. But I think it won't. It's just another layer that's gonna have the same thing, which is kind of like a fractal pattern. But like the idea would be, the essence of the thing is just you click on here and then it shows a bunch of cards that have different options. But this is the thing that I'm not really sure, because there might be other stuff that I want to do that like is different, and that's the challenge that I have. But maybe I can display them as a card, but then, or I can put other like spaces here and then put the cards later. I think that's not that big of a deal. But then the tree thing, maybe I'll do the tree on this graph instead of the other one first. I think it doesn't matter that much because it doesn't take too long for this to load. So what I want to do is just create a component and put on the... So yeah, remember now why I was talking about this, is because the way that React DOM works is that if you want to load pages dynamically, which is like, for example, on the hardware here, if I click here, it goes to this route here, then you have to specify on the paths a symbol there, which I think is like this symbol here, the 2 dots, and then you put the name of a variable. So whatever you put here after the standard path you put, so in the path there that I have like this, it is this standard path here, and then after this is this fundamental ID variable. So I think that these 2 dots here specify that you're passing a variable here, and then you have to, the way that it works is that you create only one page, and then you have to create the page based on these use params here. So the variable is gonna be, you're gonna be able to get it from these use params. So in the case of the hardware, I have the fundamentals ID, I think. a graph. I'm calling a graph ID, and then it's an object, and then I access the value. And this is whatever you pass here as the variable. So this is the challenging thing, because you have to design like one page, keeping in mind that you can have a bunch of different things, and then like it gets confusing because of the stuff that I was talking about. Like if I want to do something else instead of just having the cards here, then I have to rethink about how the routing is gonna work. And the reason why I'm thinking about this is because I'm gonna have to change the other page that I'm building here. Probably should change the name now to Python graphs. But I think if I want to change the route, maybe the only thing that I have to do is just add another page here, and then I just put another pattern on the thing. So for example, instead of having these cards here, let's say I want to have another div on top of this that displays something else that takes the person to another route of the website. Then I could just create another page, and then I just put another pattern there, and this should probably work, I think. So maybe it's not that complicated. For this one, the way that it's gonna work is that they're gonna go there, and depending on the use params, I have to think about how I'm gonna structure the logic to get the animations, which is very complicated, to be honest. It's getting extremely complicated, I think. And I'm not even like scratching the surface of the stuff that I want to do. So like the thing is, I created these standard things here, the events and the animation, because I was thinking about like I'm gonna create functions that I want to reuse all the time, regardless of which animation it is. So for example, execution of a script. This would be like a standard function. So I can have a situation where after the person clicks the nodes, it highlights the execution of a variable, or how the variable changes throughout the part of the graph that is displayed. And this would be a standard event, so all I had to do is just create one function and put on this thing here, and then regardless of which thing I'm building, I would use this one. But then the challenging thing here is that I have to build another layer. So these are the paths that I was talking about. So I have the fundamental, this two dots here, fundamental ID, and that specify the component that is going to load for all the pages. So this is just going to replace whatever pattern it is there, and then you're going to access the pattern. So regardless of which pattern it is, it's going to load the same page. And maybe this is something that I should address for, because if I put a pattern that doesn't exist here, I didn't ask for this. Yeah, so that's the problem. Oh no, it's just because I changed. Maybe it still works, but it would fail because I don't have anything. Like I need to put a fallback for when the graph ID doesn't work on here. So if they put a pattern that doesn't exist, this is gonna be like something that doesn't exist. But maybe this is enough, because then it just doesn't think. It just returns here. I think this way is probably enough. Maybe I thought about this and I don't remember. So it just loads the page without the graph, but maybe we should put something else here. So instead of returning, it just load another component, like this graph doesn't exist or something. So here, for example, stuff should... like I'm having challenges to think about the name of the string. It's kind of annoying because they put Django thing, but now we're talking about this. So it's, yeah. Hopefully people don't, if they click, they don't get upset that I'm not talking about this stuff that the video is for. But here, instead of returning, I could, or I can just return like some standard component that I do, you know, graph or something like that. And then it would show, yeah, but I'll have to think about Yeah, how would I do that? I think I can maybe put a variable. Yeah, I can put a use state variable here, and then I can make it based on the condition. I can do the ternary operator instead of doing this one, and then it just loads this component instead of this one whenever they put a pattern that doesn't exist. But I'm not gonna think about this stuff right now. So the way that I found to solve this stuff now is that I'm creating this object, and then for each object I have a function. But you can see how complicated this is getting, because now I have I need to create another place on the project that is gonna handle like which functions I'm gonna use, and then from these ones I'm gonna probably use the functions that I create here. There will be standard functions. So I create standard functions for animations and events, and then I have to create another folder that is gonna call those functions, and it's gonna package everything with their graph and stuff. The reason why this is very hard is because the way that I do this right now is because probably the reason why I'm talking about this now is that the way that I set up this other page here is thinking about, because I just wanted to put something out there fast. But this is not the way that it is actually gonna work, because here I'm not making any requests or anything like that. I'm creating manually the functions. But if I want to scale, then obviously I can't do things like that, because then every time I would have to create a different file here. And like, this is the issue. This is the challenge that I have now, because instead of doing this now, the way that I'm imagining in my mind is that I'm probably gonna do an API request, and then the pattern of the API request is gonna be based on the use params here. So this is gonna call, for example, the localhost 8000, then API, and I'm gonna synchronize the patterns. And here is gonna be whatever graph ID is. And then on the back end, on the API, I'm gonna create the routes based on this pattern here as well. And then it's gonna call a function, so it's like synchronizing the backend with the front end. So it calls the function to create the graph based on whatever pattern I have here, and then it sends the graph as a JSON response. But then the issue with that is that, what if, but maybe, I think one solution would be I just pass other flag variables that are gonna indicate which animation function to use and which click function to use. But it's very hard because I'm not really sure, because the thing is, I don't know, and that's the problem. I don't know what I don't know. So I don't know how the visualizations are going to become. So it's almost impossible to think about the structure, how to structure things, if I don't know how the graphs are going to look, because then I can't have a good idea. So it's kind of like a paradox. The only way to figure out is to do it, and then I'm going to have to, if I do it in a way that is, I get unlucky and I do it in a way that is not very good, then I'm gonna have to rethink about how to restructure everything so it works with the animations and the events. Yeah, hey, Benjamin. So the REST API that I'm building is just it's gonna be for getting the structure, the file structure, and for getting the graphs. So I'm gonna have the projects here, and then I'm gonna send like I said, I'm gonna send the request based on the pattern, and then from the pattern I'm gonna have the function here on the views, and then based on this function it's gonna access the whatever project you have here. I'm gonna put Python for now, because maybe I'll expand to different languages. I think I'm gonna do the API on Python regardless, but I might, because of the thing about the compiler being in C, I might have to, I'm gonna have to figure out a way to call C files from Python. I'm pretty sure that there probably is a way, or to call executable files from Python. And then I just put the executable somewhere here from C. But I think I'm gonna focus on Python first, and then I think about it. But it's probably better to structure things based on this, which is also another annoying thing, because I don't know how much should I specify on the path here, because I don't know what kind of projects, like how much. Because one example would be if I put like scraping, AI, stuff like that here, and then I build everything with these categories in mind, because then the structure of the function is gonna depend on that, and this is the thing that I'm not really sure. But maybe it's better to just leave everything on the same folder. It's kind of hard to know, because I think that the file structure here is going to be directly related to the path on the front end. So whatever pattern I decide to put there is going to reflect the file structure here, and that's the challenging thing. Good. And you? So maybe I should just test to see. What the fuck? How do I get out of this? Probably not like this. Yes. I think you should just test to see if the thing here is working. But I have to spend time thinking about this. It matters because it's the way that I'm going to scale everything. So, like, what would be the downside of just specifying one folder here? This is the issue, that's like I need something fixed now, but then it might change later, which might be annoying. Because one thing that I might do as well is just put filters here. Probably I'm going to put filter or a search bar here. Maybe search and filters later on. So if there's a bunch of different projects, how like the structure of the search here is gonna reflect the paths on the back end, I think. So I can have, maybe I can think about different filters and then I build the thing based on that. But because it's hard to find the balance also, because then like I can get very complicated, and it's another fundamental question that I'm asking, which is hard to say, which is whether or not I'm gonna use, like, one way to go about it is to create web scraping things or functions that are going to create requests to other parts, and the other way to go about it is to try to download all the code and build like a database myself. So instead of using the projects folder, I would use a database with all the GitHub code, for example. I think the best route is probably the database one, because I want to have control of the code. If I can't go that route, if I can do that, then obviously the second option is to just figure out how to allow user input first. Because obviously, and then as I put options to allow people to decide whether or not they want to give their data or not. And then I can use that data to train AI models, obviously. So, and this is the question, because the problem is that it fundamentally changes everything. But maybe that's the reason why, that's the balance I'm going to have to find between monolith and microservices, I think. Which is going to be, again, one of the polarities, which is going to converge towards infinity. And I think the best distribution is just a funnel. There's going to be a monolith for some extent, and then... So the reason why I'm talking about this is because I might have to create another... like, one way to solve this would be just to do whatever way I'm doing now, and then when it gets to the point where I'm going to have to decide, because, yeah, I'm going to have to decide which route to go, then I can just create another API or another server and then put the logic on the other one and then just connect them. I don't know how to get out of this thing here. Discuss ChatGPT. Or maybe if Fuck it. So run server is the one that runs the server. So there's a problem already. So it's probably the pattern here. It's either this one or the other one, obviously. It's either this. I think I have to think about this stuff instead of coding, because that's the part that matters the most. The code is kind of easy nowadays because you have access to all the information on the internet, so... It's probably complaining about this thing here. So maybe the API should be inside of this other folder. That's ChatGPT. The text to speech is not working, so... Yeah, so it does recommend should be put on the same level. Agile object is not iterable. Maybe it's because of the pattern here. I should put something here. But I don't think that should be the case. Maybe it's the name. Just put here. Yeah, API runs. Oh, it's patterns, not pattern. Yeah. So now I think it's working. I think I'm gonna try to... Should I put... I was thinking about initially doing with the curl command, should do requests, and then worrying about the front end later, but maybe I should do the front end first. So I already got some stuff from ChatGPT here. Maybe I should separate these things though, or change the name from editor. I'm gonna put IDE instead of editor, that's better. So I forgot what I was thinking about. So the idea is going to be to create a component, and then from this component, which is going to be the entry point, I'm not really sure how complicated it's going to be. From the ChatGPT prompt, it says that he gave me this response here where I created two different components. So, and it didn't give me anything to put here, so I'm going to have to see, because I didn't spend time looking at it. What I assume is probably going to happen is that I have the main component, and then from this component I use other components inside of the ID. But I'm going to separate this from the code editor, obviously. And then I'm going to use this component on the other file. So the reason why I have to think about the other stuff is because of the state management here. Because whatever I decide to pass as props, I'm probably going to use a Zustan star as well at some point to handle state. But whatever I decided to pass as props is going to depend on the routes from this thing, which I explained that it's going to be hard to figure out because I have to think about how I'm going to do this. So, yeah, because it's very complex, I need to clarify my mind, and then I need to break down into different things. I think this is the hardest part. Like, instead of... Because one thing that I can do is just code some stuff here, but I think it doesn't matter that much to me. Like, the only reason why I would code some stuff here is because of the name of the live stream on YouTube, the name of the title. But maybe I might change that. It's kind of hard to find a name that's gonna fit, which goes into the paradox of search, because, like, by definition, like, the more complex things get, the harder it becomes to compress them into names. So, let me think. So I could do some stuff here. So what should I do first? That's a lot to think about. So maybe the request is gonna be inside of the... Yeah, but then it's gonna have to depend. So I'm thinking, like, the request that I'm gonna do to... Actually, it's better if I put it inside of this thing, and then I pass as props the... So one question is whether or not it's worth it to pass as props. So here I'm gonna, like, import this component here, or whatever component I decide to use, to load the ID, because I have to load the file structure based on which project it is. So I'm gonna need this ID here, and then from this ID I should do the logic. So maybe I just pass as props the data structure that the thing's gonna need. As the thing receives the data, which is probably this thing here from ChatGPT, and then from the data it creates the directories. It creates the divs here. So imagine the way that it works is just a normal div that has some styles, probably some icons to represent the folder. Then when you click the folder, it doesn't go to another route. It just opens hidden elements, hidden nested divs, which is probably this thing here. And if you click one of the files, then it changes the route because it has to change the state. Which is another complication, because then I'm not really sure how it's going to work with the graph. So I'm going to have to either synchronize or find a way to... One way that I was thinking about saving state for the graph is that some stuff I saw on the Zustan documentation, they say that you can allow people to save the state. So maybe later on, once I have the user, like all the user stuff figured out, then I can save the state of the graphs based on the user, which would be a global Zustan star for the whole thing. But until then, like, I have to think about, because then, like, when they click here, it's gonna go to another path, which is another difficult thing, because the path is gonna be connected to the other ID, which gets very confusing. So, like, I have the main one here that's gonna have a bunch of patterns, and then from this point, I'm gonna have a bunch of other routes that are going to be related to the graph structure of this pattern here. So I have to think about how to synchronize this with the React DOM and how to synchronize this with the graph structure. Because when I change here, it has to change the... But maybe this, it works everything from here. Yeah, I think that the key is here. So I need to think about what is the best way to structure the logic here so that based on the request, it synchronizes the graph with the other components. And that's what I have to do. So maybe I just put, I'm just gonna import the thing there. So now I have to think about this stuff here. Let me think. So here I'm gonna receive. So the logic is gonna be here. I think the challenging part is this component, because obviously I'm gonna put here folder structure, and then I'm gonna pass data, which is probably gonna be like Python ID something in folder data. So I have to think. I think the first thing that I have to do is just clarify what questions I have to know the best route. Then after I know what questions I have to think about what is the best way to break down this, so I can break down into simpler challenges and create the list here of what things I have to do first. So from the front end, I'm gonna separate this stuff from the... maybe this is another thing that I'm gonna have to do, is just create another component. So I create a blank code editor that is just gonna show the text. So I'm gonna open the other file. Yeah, it's definitely better to think about this stuff now instead of focusing on the code, because it doesn't matter that much, the code. I think it's much more important to figure this other stuff. But first, I'm gonna focus on this to just make it work, just show something there. So let me think about this. And one thing that I can do is just ask ChatGPT to create the folder components. And so the way that I think it is just the folder is the folder component, and so maybe I'll put file and then folder. Probably should close everything else as well, so that it doesn't get confusing. I'm not sure if this works though. I don't think... It's kind of complicated because it should be... Now this is challenging. Because the way that ChatGPT did here is this, like, I have the main entry point, and then I have the folder or file, but then if I structure this, should be... Like, I'm gonna have to structure the folder to be... Or maybe it did... maybe it did like this. Oh, that makes sense, I think. Because then when you click on the folder, it just shows the same components. Because it has to be recursive to some degree, I think. Either recursive or... And the question is, would it show? Yeah, let me think. I think this makes sense. So the way that it works is that it shows the folder, and then the children is just the... Yeah, I have to think about the data structure here. So the children, I think, is just an array. Array of objects that contain the specifications of... What do you think? So in the top of the thing is just gonna contain a bunch of folders and files. That is the entry point of the stuff, which I'm gonna receive from this thing here after I do the request. So from the request, I have to send... I'm probably gonna use OS walk inside of this function. And then I get all the structure based on this path. And like there's gonna be a fixed path. So maybe get Python folder structure. I think it's better to probably specify on the URL, like from the front end, which one's gonna be. So the fixed part of the path is just gonna be... I'm gonna do something like current dir. It's gonna be OS and then whatever I have or whatever I can use. And then I'm gonna have the fixed parts. Just gonna be projects. And then this other part is gonna be whatever they pass on the request. And then based on this, I'm gonna do OS walk. Just gonna get all the structure, and then based on the structure, I have to think about how I'm gonna format so I can send out the response. And the response is gonna be here, and then from this response, I'm gonna pass as data to the folder thing. So from this response, probably what I'm gonna do is just create another... What makes it difficult is the events and the animation, because I have to think about... And the other properties here as well. But this is something that I had to change as well, because I was having some problems with the directed for some stuff related to the arrows, like on some animations and some other things. So I changed, which I think is better now. Instead of making like instead of making one variable that decides whether or not the entire graph is directed or undirected, I'm making based on the edge itself. So I'm putting the property on the edge object itself, and that allows me to have the flexibility if I want only certain arrows should be directed, certain edges should be directed. But obviously increases complexity as well. So I have to think about, and this is the challenge, is like I'm creating this, is very similar but much more complicated than the challenge that I had with the blog, which is figuring out the paths with the links, because you have to create an archetype page. It's like a template page that is going to work for a bunch of data, And because the data has variance and you don't know how it scales, it's gonna be very difficult to like think about what is the best way to structure. So that's the challenge that I'm having now. Should think about. Because like if I do the request, from the request I have to think about what information I'm gonna send back. So one, it's probably gonna be like the folder structure. It has to be the folder structure, so the data for the folder structure, which I'm gonna pass to the components that is gonna create the file. So folder structure, then I'm gonna pass the data there. Then the other things are gonna be the graph. But the other, yeah, the problem is that I think I have to do everything on the same endpoint, because it's not very good if I create two different endpoints. Because then one of them can break, and but maybe it is better. I think I'm gonna do just one endpoint, so I have to send everything. I'm probably gonna send an object, and then the object has the key. The keys are gonna be the specifications of what each thing is gonna be. And then from that, I can have more complex data structures that are the values for the keys that are gonna contain information about the graph and the events. But the biggest question is, how do I think the only solution is just create functions. Because I don't know how it's gonna work, so I'm gonna have to create functions. Maybe create one function and then receive stuff as arguments to that function. And then based on the arguments of the function, the function works kind of like a controller. I receive the data from the backend, and then I pass as arguments, and then based on the arguments inside of the function, I decide which functions to call to decide what stuff I'm gonna put here. And then I can always put the same format on the function. But then, yeah. Yeah, I can make events optional. Yeah, but then how would I do it? Because maybe when I don't have events, I just put like something that people do that I've seen. Just create a function like this. It's just an empty function. I think that's what I'm going to do. So I just use this function here. I create one for the events and one for the thing, and I just default. So I think that's what I have to do. I create a template function. A templates. And I think this probably would work for regardless with which language I'm using or whatever. But maybe I can pass that as arguments to this function as well. So the template would determine what happens in the rest. Yeah, let me think about it. Actually, I think that the function has to be only for the events and the animation. Yeah, that's how it's gonna work, I think. So because the graphs is the stuff that I was saying before, it depends on the project it is, and it's not scalable if I have to create a function for every single graph, because I can have a bunch of different graphs and then it doesn't scale. So the graph is always going to come from the API, the graph data structure. Maybe it does make sense to make them separate, because if I make them combine, if I make them on the same call, then they're coupled together, which is bad, I think. Because maybe in the future I want to swap, like I want to keep the same ID but change graphs. That's probably actually what I'm gonna do. But maybe not, because the logic for changing the graphs is gonna. This is another complication. Because the way that I was thinking about it also is creating another custom component. I'm gonna have the like either code editor or something else here. So like I'm trying to replicate the same thing that VS Code has, And then based on, yeah, this is actually very difficult. So actually I need 3 more components because I need this thing here. So this is the one that, the way that I'm envisioning is that you're gonna have different options here, and then when you click, it's gonna show like different customization components. So this is one, so it would work like as an entry point component. I can create another entry point here, like sidebar or something like that. And then this one contains the information for whatever is gonna show here. So this is just gonna render specific components based on things that I receive as well, like the state of the file structure. So yeah, let me think about this. Because then maybe it's better to create something else that like encapsulate both of these components. Yeah, I think that would be better actually. So instead of putting folder structure here, I put something else. And that thing regulates the state of the overall thing. And then based on the state of that component, I change the information that is going to be displayed. So whenever it's on this icon here, when they click on this icon, it shows the folder structure component, and then later on I have other customization components. Because the way that I'm thinking about it is that I want to add a bunch of abilities to filter the graph, do pagination, and other customizations. And then based on those customizations, it's going to change the state of the graph. But then it is very challenging. Because I have to figure out. I'm gonna need context, I think. That's the only way. I have to create a Zustan store. Because inside of this component, if I do customization components, then they will have to change the thing. So this component here would be regulated by the Zustan store. I think that's what I have to do. And then I have to create... Yeah, so that's what I'm gonna do now. That way I can change whatever's rendered here by changing the values of star in each component. I'll be right back. And this is getting super complicated. I was thinking about like whether or not I need to do this, but I think I do. Because like it is already optional to put this stuff here on this component. So I can create the graph without putting this stuff here. But the reason why I need to do another one, I think I need to do another component that is called graph wrapper, is because I'm gonna have to do the same pattern that I did for this component here, which is just create another resistance store and then do the dependency injection thing to encapsulate. And then this graph component is gonna contain the state of the outer state management of the graph, which is gonna be the state management of the... But maybe it's a bad idea. I'm not really sure. Because one of the reason why I wanna make the filter outside of this one here is that when I change values of the edges and nodes through the resistance store, it doesn't re-render the components. So it will render some parts only when you specify, but I think that it doesn't build the graph again, I think. And for other kinds of logics, I think it probably will be better to live outside of the graph itself. Yeah, because that's the thing, like, if I want to do pagination or other stuff like that, I think it makes more sense to leave that outside of the graph component itself. So I need another store to regulate this other, like, other customizations that are not related specifically to what happens inside of the graph, but how the graph is going to be shaped by the data outside of the graph. So I think what I need to do is just create another component, then wrap this one in the other one. And then on the other one, I create a store that has these different values here for what is going to be the edge, the nodes, and the events. And then based on that, after doing the requests, on the requests, I'm going to have to set up in a way that's going to take into, or is going to shape the state of the store based on whatever data received from the API calls. And I think it's probably going to be better to separate because I don't want to make them coupled, like I said. But I think it's not a problem. I can do the requests on the same thing. I'm not really sure how I'm going to do the requests because remember, people don't recommend use effect anymore to do the requests. So I have to see if there's other, or which way I'm going to go about it. But then I'm probably going to just create another endpoint here. And then this endpoint is going to be for getting the graph. Because in case, or maybe I just do get graph and I separate based on the request thing. So the way that it's gonna work is that I'm gonna do the request for the folder and then right after the request for the graph. Based on those requests, I change the values of the resistance store that wraps the graph component. And that way I'm gonna be able to link the graph component with the customization components outside that I'm gonna put here. Or actually, I'm gonna have to put them inside of the wrapper. So it just passes props the information, maybe. Now let me think about this. I think I can do some logic that decides. The other complexity is that maybe I'll have different kinds of pages. They'll display. So for example, in one page I want to show only the tree thing, like this part here, but some other pages I also want to show the ID, and then some other pages I want to show different types of IDs. So based on that, I have to create some logic inside of the graph wrapper that is going to determine which component shows, and then all of them receive props, and then based on the props I create the different components to manage their state. all of this is gonna depend on the requests that I do here, I think. It's gonna be based on the URL. So, yeah, let me think. So I think I'm just gonna do like a simple version and then I think more about this later. Just gonna copy the stuff that I have from this one. So maybe everything should be inside of that component. I think that's probably better. Because it is better if the tree or whatever I put there has access to the thing as well, I think. This is the question though. It's very hard because I'm not really sure now if I should put the tree. The problem is I think I have to do that because the way that it would make the most sense in my mind is that I like wrap both of them so I have like one component that handles everything, which would be like this, always this stuff here, then I have the sidebar here. And then I have some logic here that is gonna determine based on props what thing's gonna, or I create an object that determines what's gonna load based on the props that this component receives, which would be different types, these different types of things here. But the question is that like where should, because then it would make sense that this tree here is inside of this part here, because it's a part of these things that are possible here. But the challenge with this is that if I click a file, then it's going to change the route. And then when it changes the route, it's going to change the request that happens here. So this is the tough thing. It changes everything else. So because I want to avoid doing a cycle, obviously. So I think this is the problem, because like if I put the tree here and then the logic inside of the tree component changes the route, then it changes this component again, which changes the tree, which goes forever. So how can I do this? I think this is probably the way to go, but then I have to be careful with the logic with the file tree components. But it feels like it's very difficult, because then it's gonna become very easy to make mistakes, I think. So I'm not really sure if any of this is being like, if people understand what's going on. But pretty much like the state of this thing here is gonna be linked with this route here. That's the stuff. Because I have to make the logic of the other one based on whatever route I have here, which is gonna be the one that I receive here. Because I'm gonna use this one to make a call to this API, which is gonna, based on the path that I send, is gonna select the folder of the project and the graph. And then based on that, I'm gonna load these components here. I'm gonna pass as props the data that I received from the call. And then from them, I'm gonna manage the state of whatever happens here. But then the issue is like, because then it might work, but the problem is that how do I think about the path? Because inside of the file structure, obviously I don't want to, like, if if I trigger another request, then... So maybe instead of sending the whole thing, I just send... but I think that's the way to go, but it's gonna be massively complicated, I think. It's actually gonna be very hard. Because I think what I have to do is just synchronize the state of the backend with the front end. It's gonna be very hard. So for example, instead of sending the whole file structure here, I just send the data that is equivalent to the path that they are on the front end. So if I did OS walk and I pass as a... like the shape of the data structure is gonna be dependent on the synchronization of the front end and the back end. That's the challenge. Because then if they... So for example, let's say that they are on the Python folder. Let's say they are on this folder here, in this page. Then I send as a data everything that this folder has. Then they click on the app file, for example. That would make the routing change, like the path here. And then based on that path, we would make another request. So you would call the API again, but with the different path. And then the different path would send the files again, based on whatever exists there. But then the challenge is like, how do I determine the structure of the graph function? That's the challenge. Because if I do it like this, then I lose flexibility, I think. So when they are calling on the second time after they change the file, which changes the path, then the challenge becomes that what if I want to create multiple different types of graph? If I structure the function in a certain way, it's gonna force me to have only one type of graph in that situation. Which, like, it would work fine if, for example, like each graph represents the information on the file itself. Then, like, that makes sense because I'm making the request based on the path of the file, and then I can create the logic of the function that is going to determine which graph is going to send based on whatever file is being requested. So the encoding of the path is going to be on the request. The request determines what graph I'm going to send. But then the challenge is, like, let's say here I have like several different types of graph. One is the ST of the file, let's say, is the file graph. And then based on the request, I do some functionality here that is gonna get the graph and send. But what if I wanna, in some situations, I wanna show something else? Like I wanna show the graph of the whole project, for example, or the graph of how the variables connect with each other. That's the challenge. And then obviously I can create some value here that is gonna determine based on that, like based on which path it is, but it gets... I'm not really sure if that's the best way to go about it. The challenge is like the distribution of flexibility with the thing. And it's very challenging because I have to think about multiple different scenarios at the same time. So I think what I'm trying to get at is like I have to find where I can put... I think that the solution is probably like having archetypes of things, but the challenge is because I don't know what kind of visualizations are going to be good or not. I don't know how to create the archetypes. So, like if I have a standard type of graph that I always show in some standard situation, and that's probably the way that is going to go. So for example, like I can have... I don't think that's going to be the case, but let's say one of the standard graphs is the AST of the file, which is the stuff that I have here. What makes it even more challenging is the pagination thing, is because some files are going to be too big, so I have to break the graph down. And every time, that's the problem with this approach, like the way that things are going, is because every time I'm going to make a change on the state, it's going to change everything else. So, and if I don't have enough flexibility to change everything, then one of the changes might break everything else. So I don't want to be forced in a path that is not going to be very good. But let's say one standard graph is the AST of the file. If that's the case, then I can always, because I know that one of the graphs that I'm always going to use is going to be the AST, I can just send information based on a variable here that's going to determine whether or not they show that type of graph. And the thing is that it's going to be dependent on the I think the only way to solve this is if I ignore this for now, and if I focus on what kind of graphs is better to build. I think I have to solve that first. Because I think the way that it's going to work is that the management of the graphs is going to depend on the state of the files. So there's probably going to be archetypal graphs that represent different kinds of things. I think that's most likely the way that it's going to go. And the way the graphs are going to change is going to be dependent on which file they are at, and the other customizations for the other things. And then for each one of them, I'm always going to have to send... No, actually, only when they change the files, I have to think about this, like the information that I'm going to send on the request. But if I'm forced to send that information, then I'm going to have to send the information, or I can make it optional as well on the function. I can do the control flow, like if the stuff exists, then do that. If it doesn't, then do something else. Yeah, I think for the other ones it doesn't change much, because the other ones are more connected to the state of the graph itself, which kind of visualization, so it's easier. I think it's only the file structure one is going to depend. The routing of the file has to be connected with the logic of the paths, because it's going to determine how I have to structure the function so it works. So I send the correct information for each one. Let me forget about this for now. I'm gonna build the components. I have to think more about this. It's very hard to think about it. I have to think about a different name as well, so I don't get confused by the... Maybe that's not a big problem, because... Like, this is the positive side, I think, of the way that I did things. Like once I figure out the structure of the graph from inside Like I isolate from the rest of the thing, so I don't have to think about it anymore. So like I can separate in my mind when I'm working on inside of the graph and when I'm working outside, and just regulate the tabs that I have based on that. But maybe it is a good idea because of the, I think I should put another, should put graph wrapper star. Do I leave the same names here or not? I think I'm just gonna leave the same names. That's probably fine. I have to focus on one thing at a time, so otherwise I'm gonna be overwhelmed. So create external app store, manage optimization, and free other slash file. Yeah, I think at the beginning I only start with, I'm probably gonna think about a lot more other stuff, but in the beginning it's just gonna be 2 tabs, I think. So one thing that I have to think about, so there's gonna be an external, like a parent component that is gonna handle, it's gonna have the tab, and the other one is as children. So create, I have to think about the name for that stuff. Name that would be good. Just gonna call it tab wrapper for now. Each one of these I'm gonna have to break down, I think, into several different things, because on each one of them I have to figure out stuff. Like one thing that I'm gonna have to figure out is how to change the, like, how do I structure this? So like on the sidebar there's obviously gonna be a click event based on the icon that is gonna decide which thing is shown. But this is the issue. The thing is, like, maybe it's not the best to call graph star. Maybe I should put everything on the same star, I think. But this is another question. Yeah, I think I probably have to do 2 different stars, which is annoying. Because with props it's not gonna work. If every time I click on the component it has to show something different here, which is gonna have to show. Yeah, maybe not. Maybe it works. So actually I think it's better, because otherwise I'm gonna have to do on another store. So I create a tab inside of the thing. So instead of making another component and then passing props, I just make it on the same level, and then I pass props to the other ones. Like based on the props, I show. Yeah, I can just use state instead of the other component, and then based on the state, I decide which thing I'm gonna show. Well, that's a lot better. That way I don't have to do a store. So in the beginning, I'm probably gonna have just two components, the tree and another one for customizing. Let me just finish the thing there. And think about this. So this component is gonna have the other ones. I'm gonna close all the other stuff so I don't get confused. Maybe it's better to put star here. The names are kind of hard because I don't want to get very confusing. But if I leave as context, it's kind of. I think I'll think about this later. I'll just leave like this for now. Yeah, now let me think about this. I wanna try to make it to put nodes edges. And so on this one, I think that I'm gonna put the other. This is the stuff that I was saying before that I wasn't sure why, like if I needed to do this, because I knew that like I would have to do the same thing here. It makes sense. So it kind of, because I have to do this, then it made me think whether or not this is necessary, but it is gonna be necessary because of the other things, I think. Maybe I should just copy the, like everything. Now I have to change here. Hopefully it doesn't break everything. I think it's on another file because I changed the name there, maybe. Yeah, I changed the graph context thing. It's on the other one. I'm gonna test to see. Yeah, I really need to spend some time thinking about tasks later. Yeah, I'm gonna remove the events and the thing here, see if it works. Yeah, it works. So this. Yeah, I think this is the thing, like, because I had to change to be directed, I changed the way that I was building the graph, because I was having some problems with the directed, so like by default is undirected. Yeah, I'm gonna have to spend time thinking about. Yeah, I have to do this stuff here, sure. I guess I can change. I was like, the issue I was having is that when I disabled the physics engine and I was doing the click events, the arrows were not updating in the correct way, and I thought it was because of the cycle of React. So what I had to do is change the way that I was building the graph, and I decided to just make like, because before I was deciding based on whether or not the edge was directed in the beginning, whether or not I would create the arrow object, but I decided that it's better to just create regardless the arrow object, regardless of whether or not they are directed. and then let the physics engine, or let both the physics engine and the main React component, the graph component, decide whether or not the edges will be displayed. And by default, I thought it would be better to just put them as undirected because it's more efficient, I think. But I'm not really sure. Like, the issue there is that is also like, because now it's kind of pointless to have this thing here. It should always be false. Like, it should always reflect whatever state I decide to have the thing in the beginning. So I'm just gonna show here. So now it's based off this thing here. So if I make it true, then all of them are gonna start with arrows, I think. Yeah. And if I make it false, they start undirected. So the props don't change anything anymore. That's the downside of the thing. And then I think I was trying to think about like how to make the props change the stuff again. But honestly, I think it's not worth it, probably. Like, it's a problem that's probably not worth spending a bunch of energy. I think it's better to just leave a standard and then focus more energy on the pagination itself for the graph optimization. Because the reason why I was thinking like to make it dependent on the props is that it's going to I was envisioning like more that the graphs may have a bunch of nodes. But maybe I'll still do this. Like, I'll give the option to change how many nodes are displayed for the person. So I put in a range, like I start with the default as 330, I think. And then I'll let the people decide whether or not they want to display more nodes. But that gets very complicated because then it's going to change everything else. So I think if I want to do pagination, I'm probably not going to be able to allow the people to customize how many nodes they want to show. I think the biggest problem here is actually both. I was gonna say it is the physics engine, but it's actually both. It's just the limits are different. So this is another thing I'm gonna think about in the future, how to optimize the physics engine. It's probably gonna be WASM and Rust, but the visualization also is gonna have limits. So it is gonna have a difference. But I think it's probably better to leave as default for the graph to be directed. I think that makes more sense. Because right now, what is capping the performance is the physics engine, I think, not the visualization. So, and it's probably always better to have as, but maybe I have situations where, yeah, because now I fundamentally changed the way that I'm doing, so it doesn't make sense anymore. Because, yeah, that's the thing. I still have the customization, but now it's from the edges themselves. That's the thing. So I think it doesn't make sense anymore to have directed as props. Because now instead of making based on the props that I receive, I'm making based on the edge itself, the value of the edge. So it's gonna depend on the way that I build the graph, whether or not it is directed. And then on the customization, I think I can still leave. Maybe I can make it more complex so that it doesn't change all of them. But I'm gonna leave it like this for a very long time, I think. It's just a lot easier. But the problem with this is that if people change, then it's gonna lose the information for each one, because this is changing the value for all of them, and there isn't any logic that. But obviously I can put something else here that determines whether or not, like, or removes or adds directed based on the IDs you pass, something like that. The node IDs. There's also something that I don't think is worth spending a bunch of time now. Maybe in the future. So I'm gonna leave as true for now, and Yeah, just remove this. Yeah, maybe I should go on the store there and change again. And still false. No, it's because of this. And this is for the physics engine, so I'm thinking about whether or not I removed or changed. You know, not accepting the directed anymore. Was because of the thing. So if I don't pass, it's gonna be false automatically. Maybe I should just leave as true for now and think about this later. I think this one doesn't matter anymore. Because I'm not using. So I think I'm gonna leave it like this. I'm gonna take a break now and just do the yoga nidra thing and then continue. I forgot to put the timer here. I'm gonna reduce. I'm gonna just do 2 hours. Oh. This is obviously not related to the thing, but I'm not really sure what you put on the title of the stream. Because like I don't want to get caught up into because the point of what I'm doing is not to like do the specific topic, is more to just continue to work on the stuff that I'm working on. But it's hard to find a title or to think about a title that's gonna be like allow me to do whatever comes up. So I don't want to be trapped by the title and then just focus on this stuff, because then it doesn't matter that much. It's more about the overall thing, and I have to think about everything else every time that I'm doing something, because obviously everything is related. So I think it's worth spending time thinking about this stuff. I have to spend time thinking about this, I think, because otherwise it's like kind of pointless. The rest, so. So now let me remove this. So what I'm gonna do now is just create other components inside of this graph wrapper that are gonna be the way that I talked about before. Just gonna create. I think for the reasons I explained before, the tab thing is gonna be here. I think it's not. I have to see, because the issue, like the goal is to create this thing here and then change the state of whatever is gonna show on the other thing. So to do that, obviously I'm gonna have to create something like this that wraps both of this part here with this part. But the issue is that this one has to manage the state of this one. So if I create a component for this one, then I don't see like an easy way to change the state of this, of what's gonna show here, because here is gonna depend on several different components, I think. The component that I'm gonna display, maybe I always make like the file. Yeah, I'm not gonna leave it for props. I'm just gonna. The one that shows in the beginning is always gonna be the. So I'm gonna have to use a state. Oh, maybe actually. Yeah, this is better to put on another. So I'm gonna put them together, but I'm gonna put this one on another component. So what can I call this? Because the reason why is because I was just thinking now that I have to use state inside of this component, and then I don't think it's a good idea to just put on the same level as this one that has the context. So maybe IDE customization. I'm just gonna leave like this, and then I think about this later. And then based on this value, I select whatever shows up there. So here I'm gonna put the information for this stuff here. It's probably gonna be a div. And then here I put on click. And then outside of this, I have the other stuff. I'm not sure. I think I can put if statements here. No, I can't. So either I create an object here in the beginning, and then I select based on the object, or So I've seen on Twitter someone talking about this, but someone said that the downside of creating an object where you have the options here. So each option would be a key value pair, so for example 3, and then you have the tree or folder file, whatever. And then here I would put options, then customization. Like the downside of doing this is that it's gonna render all the components in the beginning. The positive side is that it is more readable, I think, but the downside is that it loads everything. So for that reason, it's better to use ternary. But then the downside of the ternary, if I have, I think I'm not gonna have a bunch, but maybe I have 5, like, or 6, like it is here. 7 actually. So if I have 7 components, it's kind of like, depending on how big they are, it's kind of bad to do like this. But then it's kind of bad to do them with ternaries, because I have to nest the ternaries as well, because I can't use if else there. The other thing I can do is just put a bunch of this and then just do the simple ternary. So customization equals a tree. I load the folder tree. And now it's new. And then I just do a bunch of this. But that's kind of bad, because then, like, I'd want to allow for some situation where it might load true. Well, obviously, yeah, maybe this way works fine, because the strings would be different, obviously, each time. Here I have to put another div, I think. So I think for now I'm gonna focus on the structure. I'm gonna think about this stuff later. And I'm gonna focus on the structure of the thing. So I'm just gonna start, and maybe I'll do a component that is gonna be a blank thing. I'm not sure if ID is the... Maybe it is good enough. And I put inside of the ID. Then I just make a blank thing that is gonna later on be the customization. Which the first thing I think I'm gonna do is just put filter graph. Then the second thing is pagination that I'm thinking about. And then I'm gonna think about... the purpose of this customization is gonna be to select or to create different kinds of graphs based on the visualization. The most challenging thing is synchronizing everything, like synchronizing the state of everything with the graph. That's really hard. Because like one thing I can do, for example, is just like on the customization that I'm gonna create here, I'm thinking about, for example, like I select a different kind of graph for the file. So for example, let's say I have the AST here for the file. I'm not gonna do exactly like this, but just as an example, let's say I have the loaded, or I have the graph that only shows the AST for variables in the current file that is being displayed by the ID. And then on the customization, I want to allow the option to show the imports instead, the connection of the imports for the whole project. But then if I do that and I change, like it's gonna change the graph, and not only the graph, I'm gonna have to think about the... But maybe I don't associate the folder structure with this customization. I think that's probably better. So I just always leave the state of the tree separated from the customization of the graph. And then the customization allows you to change the graph in different ways, but the tree is always the same. It's always selecting the same file. But probably it would be better if I was able to synchronize the tree, because then one thing that would be nice to do is just highlight on the file itself, the code of the file, synchronize the highlighting of the code of the file with the graph. I think that would be very, very nice. So for example, I can do some functionality that every time you highlight and then you put color on a variable name, for example, on the file, it highlights on the graph every place that the variable exists. So I do think I have to aim for synchronizing the file, but maybe not. Maybe like, because the tree structure can always be the same of the files that are being displayed. But if I select, it's gonna depend, because depending on which file is selected, it's gonna change the one that is being displayed at the moment. So like, it's connected by proxy, I think. I have to connect the state of the ID, like the place where the code exists, with the customization of the graph and with the tree structure. And then the tree structure is connected by proxy with the customization of the graph. But this star is gonna be... this logic is gonna be on this star, so... Yeah, I think the key... So this star is gonna be kind of complex. The key is to put all the functionality on the star so that way you can connect everything together. And then the challenge is how to synchronize the functionality of the star with all the components. So this state works. But it's getting more and more clear in my mind the more I think about it. But it's like, still very hard to think about everything. Let me think about this. I should also pass an option here, so like because that will allow me to put this stuff everywhere. So I have to pass an option display ID, and I do this. So if this is true, then I display this stuff, otherwise no. And then here, I'm gonna leave separate, I think. Actually, maybe I have to... So maybe I have to pass another props on this one to determine whether or not I'm gonna show the code editor. This is gonna get very complex. Because I think the easiest thing will be to... Maybe it's not necessary if I do everything based on the store, I think. Because I'm thinking about what is the best place to put the code editor if I want to if it's inside of this one, along with the other options. Or if I should put it on here. Because I also want to make it dependent on props as well, if it shows or it doesn't show. But I think it's probably better to separate here and then I just connect them with the store. That makes more sense. Because at least in my mind... Yeah, because I have three different things. Like one is the stuff that is going to show, the other is the tabs, and the other is the editor. So my mind makes more sense to separate the editor. It might be... The editor is going to be kind of complex as well, because I'm probably going to put logic inside of the editor that displays different kinds of editors depending on the prompts as well, or some star value. Yeah, this is another interesting idea. So I can make it based on the star, what's going to display on the editor thing. That way, when you customize the... When you change the customizations, you could like change the IDE as well. So I think that I'm gonna write this down, like synchronize the states. Maybe instead of calling graph star, I should call it IDE star. That makes more sense. I think I'm gonna change. Maybe I leave it like this and I change off screen. But I think I'm probably gonna change because it makes more sense if I'm gonna generalize, or like either I should create another star just to handle this stuff. But I'm not really sure if it's worth it to create another one just for that, because the graph is probably not gonna change much. Like the only thing that I have to change on that I will change on the graph from the outside is just the structure of the graph itself. All the other stuff is gonna be customizable inside of the graph component, I think. So I don't think it makes sense to just make a completely different star to... Maybe I don't even... No, I do think I need to put the nodes and edges because then it makes it easier. Yeah, but it's probably better to leave everything on the same star. I'll be right back. I think what I should do is just like forget about all this stuff and just try to do something with the API there. So I'll focus on this stuff later, but maybe I'll put the comment here. Let me focus on the tree thing first. don't even know if I can. I have to test this first, if I can do the components recursively like this. Problem here is that I need the data as well, so data is gonna come from the props probably as well. The props. I'm just trying to think about. The first thing that I want to do is just see. I want to see what shows up there when I put this stuff here. Oh. It's probably better if I make it based on something else. Maybe not, because I'm passing the data. I'm passing everything to this one. I was gonna say, like, maybe it's better to make like this condition dependent on whether or not I'm passing the stuff that is necessary for rendering this thing here. Yeah, maybe that's the case. Because then, like, obviously it would be bad if I just put true here and then I'm not passing the other props that are required to run this one, so. I think first I'm gonna make just based on nodes and edges, like I have the other one there. Then I think about... Yeah, I'm gonna build the thing first, then I think about what conditions to put here. Or just add whatever is gonna be like necessary to put there. So this one, the way that I'm thinking, maybe I change the click event as well. Yeah, but I'm thinking about putting this is gonna hold the icons, which is gonna be this stuff here. And then when you click, it's gonna change this one, and this one shows whatever is displayed here. That's the idea. So I wanna see on the browser how it looks like, and then after that, I think like the issue is that I have to like now is the complicated part because I have to think about the structure of this thing here and how it's gonna be related to the API. So I'm gonna be making the request from here, and then from here I send the data. So I think the first thing that I have to do, at first I need to see if it's loading anything there. So let me. Yeah, that's the problem. Because I have to think about the structure of this. So I'm thinking about asking ChatGPT because I have to think about the structure of the data here. I think that's the thing. And how it's gonna be, how it's gonna work. So maybe I just comment everything out now, and yeah, I think that's what I'm gonna do, so I don't get like too confused or overwhelmed. Because I want to think about the request first, then I think about this structure. But if I can't do it like this, like call recursively, then it's gonna be really hard. Yeah, I'm not really sure if this is the best actually. Yeah, I don't think that the way that ChatGPT did this is very good. Like maybe it's the most efficient way, but it's not. It's very confusing. Because now that I'm thinking about it, it would be better to just. But the thing is, you need to loop over. And maybe this is the only way. Because there can be an infinite amount of nested folders that have files and folders as well. So, and you're not gonna know how many. So it has to be like this, I think. So when you open one, it has to be, but it's kind of confusing, like in the beginning here. Because I think I'm thinking about this thing here in the wrong way, in the way that it's gonna show up. I'm gonna focus on this off stream because I need to take some time to think. Probably gonna ask ChatGPT and then just try different stuff. But I wanna see first. I wanna make the request first and see what's happening there. So I'm gonna print both on here and there. So I think the last thing that I'm gonna do on stream, I'm not gonna take a break. I'm just gonna print here and then try to get the files. Like this is not the hard part, like I said before. The hardest part is thinking about how everything's gonna go together. This is the very challenging part. Like this stuff here, I think is kind of easy. It's gonna be just making a fetch request or using Axios to call pass localhost on the path of the thing, and then it's gonna call the function. And then based on the function, I do the thing here. I wonder if I can put two different functions as well on the same path. So like do like this, get graph. Actually, I could just call one function instead of the other as well. But it's better to do based on different endpoints, I think. I don't remember how to do it in JavaScript, but I think it's like this. I'm thinking about a name for this. Maybe get graph as well, or get folder structure. Why was it working before? I don't understand. It's probably because of their weight there. Oh yeah. Oh, I don't understand why he's complaining about return. Oh, it can't be. I can't use async with use layout effect. I'm gonna search for a way to what is the best way. I know there are other libraries that are recommended to do requests. Use effect is not recommended for requests anymore. But I'm just doing like this because I want to see if it works. If I'm sending and what kind of thing that I'm receiving from their requests. So the idea that I have is just to do the request here and then I set the state based on the request. Or sets a variable or whatever. Yeah, maybe I don't need to pass as props to this one. Maybe it's easier if I do it based on the store. Instead of receiving by props here, I just get from the store the values. Maybe that's better. I think it is definitely easier. But it also makes... It makes more sense to me to just receive everything from the store instead on this one. Because then it allows me to just isolate the props that this component is going to receive to this. But this one has to be inside of this wrapper. This is the whole point of this one. Because it is the store. Like this hosts the store, so... Yeah, but that's the thing, I can't send... I have to send by props. Because I can't access the values of the store outside. And so it has to be by props. It doesn't matter that much. I just pass by props. So I get the data, I send the request, I get the data. The data is going to be the folder structure and the graph. The graph data structure. And then I'm going to send to this thing here. Let me think about this. Actually, it's better if I just, like, instead of... I shouldn't make based on props here. This one I should change from props to choose the star values. But then how do I do this? So otherwise it defeats the point, I think. I want to make it so that I can customize the graph based on the components inside of here. And those components are going to change the nodes and edges, so this one has to be based on the nodes and edges from this store. And then based on the props, I would set them. I'm not really sure if this makes sense or not. Yeah, maybe it doesn't make any sense. Like the problem is I don't think I can. Unless I create another component just so I can use the use start thing. Maybe that's the way actually, now that I think about it. So this one doesn't go inside of here, it goes inside of this one. Or it goes inside of components that wraps everything. It would be essentially the same thing, but I'm just passing to another scope so I can have access to the use star from this one. Because I want to make the graphs and nodes of this one based on the values of this star here, I think. The nodes are confusing, actually. Yeah, it has to be like that because then, like, that's one of the points of this component here should change the nodes and edges. So if I'm making based on the props, then it doesn't make a lot of sense because then it wouldn't make sense to. I have to think more about it, to be honest. So another way is just to leave it like this, and then this one would change the values of this one, and then I just remove from the other star. Nodes and edges. But I don't think that's good. Hey, Buffer. What's up? It's very confusing. I should remove this from here as well. Yeah, I think that's the thing. Like from the API, I'm always gonna receive, but yeah, maybe not actually. Now that I think about it, because like I was gonna say that it would be, it makes it easier to just send the entire graph from the API, and then I do the filtering and other stuff inside of the star here. That would make it easier, and it would make sense then. But then I realized that maybe that's not the case, because maybe it would be better to just, in some situations, I just send different types of graphs based on the thing. So maybe actually it is better to just yeah, instead of having access to the nodes, or not sure if I'm gonna remove the access to nodes and edges, but I think I'm gonna remove them from the other star, and then instead of doing that, the filtering is gonna happen through the API. Maybe that's better. But I'm not really sure about that, because then, like, obviously you would, like, every time that you do the filtering, you would have to do a request, so that would kind of be bad. So maybe it's better to have both options, like, for different situations. I'm working on, so someone asks what I'm working on. I'm working on a graph visualization, not graph visualization, code visualization website. So the idea is going to be to transform code into visualization in a way that is going to make it easier to understand what is going on. So let me just comment the stuff out here. I think I'm just gonna make the requests here so it's easier, and then I'll think about the other stuff later. Not sure if it's gonna work like this, but whatever. Kind of like a debugger, but more like I have other ideas in mind in the future. Let me comment this out, then I'm gonna show you what I have so far. If I can figure out what's going on here. I should be working now. Oh, it's because it's async, maybe? So this is what I have right now. This is the visualization of an abstract syntax tree from a pandas file. And this is kind of the idea. So, like, I wanna be able to, instead of going to a project, because the way that I always learned until now is just I go into the GitHub repo and then I look at this part here and then they explain like some things, and then a lot of the times they tell you like a minimal example of how you should use the thing. And then from that point I go over as the pandas. So go here, and then I see these commands here, how to install everything. Well, they also don't have the... But the point is that like a lot of the times they show you what you should do, like first, then I would try to find the file where the thing is located. So let's say, for example, I start with init here. Then I will look at this code, and then I will try to figure out, okay, where is everything else coming from? What are the functions being used? Like what is going on? And then from here, what's gonna happen is that there's gonna be several different functions from other files. So you're gonna have to navigate through the folders. Then you're gonna have to find those functions, and then you're gonna have to see what those functions do, and those functions are gonna be called by other functions, and like it's gonna be a mess everywhere. And then it's gonna be really hard for you to understand like what is the overall bigger picture of how everything's connected and how the data is being shaped by the code. And I always had this idea since the beginning, but I'm not 100% sure if it's going to be worth it, like useful or not, but the idea is to be able to show everything simultaneously and then encode information on colors and allow like a different way to navigate throughout the project, so that it allows you to understand how everything's connected. In my mind, it makes a lot more sense. It will become a lot faster to understand what's going on. But there's still several different challenges that I have here. So I'm not 100% sure if this is going to be useful or not. Hopefully it is. So now what I'm trying to do is to... Oh, thanks. What I'm trying to do is to get data or communicate with a Django API that I'm creating. So the idea is I want to be able to make something very similar to VS Code. It's going to have one tab here, and then depending on the state of depending on which icon you click, it's going to show a different thing here. And then this is going to have like different customizations, and it's also going to display I'm trying to display the folder structure. So the idea is that I call the Python API, and the API returns the folder structure, and then I have to rebuild, not rebuild, but build the folder structure from the front end to show the files. But then the challenge is that I have to create a bunch of different components to try to figure out how to do this, because I have to synchronize the route of the API, the request. Yeah, I have to synchronize the information I send to the request with the state of the front end. So I'm breaking my head to try to do that. It's very hard. So the biggest challenge that I'm having is like figuring out how should I structure everything. And now I'm not really sure about the nodes and edges here, because I'm using a Zustan store, and like the point, I think I have to make this other graph component that creates the visualization based on the nodes from the other Zustan store. So I already have one Zustan store that manages the state inside of the graph, but I also want to create a customization components that are outside of the scope of the graph that are going to change the structure of the graph itself. And to do that, I'm thinking about using a Zustan store, but then the problem is that I'm not really sure now, like, which nodes should I be receiving here? Should I pass the nodes as props, which are going to be the ones that are returned by this call here? Because this call, I'm also going to make one call to get the graph, depending on the state of the front end. And then I'm thinking about, like, I should probably pass as props here. I think it's inevitable to pass as props, because I'm not going to have access to the value of the store, because this component contains the store. So it encapsulates the store. So I have to pass the graph as props, but then I'm thinking about whether or not I should pass I think it's going to be both, where in some situations I want to pass the entire graph, and then inside of the store I decide whether or not I'm going to filter the graph or do different things to change the structure inside of the customization. Or on other situations, it might be better to just, like, depending on the way that I send the request, I determine the logic of how I'm gonna get the graph on the backend, on the function here. And that's the challenging part, is because, like, I have to create one function, because that's the function that is gonna be called all the time, regardless of where the path on the front end is, like the path here. But this function has to encapsulate the logic for all the possible scenarios. So it's very hard to figure out, like, how to structure everything. Because if I'm always making the call to the same function, then I'm gonna have to decide based on control flow how to build the graph here, depending on the information that I receive, which is gonna depend on the state of the store on the front end. So I'm not really sure how to do this. Why you didn't implement it in low-level language like C or Rust, C++? I think web might be a bit slow. What part are you saying? The graph or the API? I assume you're talking about the graph. And the reason why is just because it's more accessible for me, because I don't have experience building the software itself, like software outside of the web. So like I would have to figure out. I think it's just harder to get people to use it. The website's a lot easier because it's like on the browser, so people don't have to think a lot. As long as they have the link, they can just go. So it becomes a lot harder if you have software because then they have to trust you to download the stuff, and then you have to display the thing, and then based on the thing they're gonna download. So eventually, probably I'm gonna do software as well outside of the browser, but I think the browser is better for the funnel in the beginning. And I'm not even sure if that's gonna work or not. But also the like doing the browser gives me like other skills that I can potentially use for other things. So because I'm learning a lot as I'm building everything. So if this doesn't work, then at least I have the skills to build other stuff that can potentially work. But the web is very slow for this, like, and this is one of the biggest challenges. And I'm trying to find ways to get around it. So the way to get around how slow it is just to encode information in a different way, I think. So for example, the size of the graph. Because of the physics engine, I can optimize. I can use Rust and WebAssembly to optimize the physics engine. But then there's still going to be a cap on the WebGL stuff, which is going to be probably around 10,000 nodes. But like once you get to 10,000 nodes or thousands of nodes, is already very confusing for people to understand what's going on. So I think it would be a problem anyway. So the way that I think about it is just like to break the problem down. So instead of doing the 10,000 nodes graph, I just break down the space of the graph into smaller nodes, and then I figure out how to connect the nodes to show the visualization. And I think that's probably like it is related to how reality works if you think about it as well. I think that's like the fundamental essence of space-time, and then the connection between how much you're capable of observing is going to determine the cause and effect relationships of your experience. It's like the spectrum of light. You're always limited in the amount of information you can receive because otherwise time wouldn't exist. So you have to, the way you're going to break down the connection is going to be a reflection of the fabric of causality that you are inserted, I think. The codes, Alchemist, thank you. Cool project, and you give a brief walkthrough. If I can give a brief walkthrough. What do you want to know specifically? What's the RF? Oh, I think I need to. I can't return. Yeah, I can't return on the Axios. That's the problem, I think. I just need to do whatever logic, but I don't know why it's complaining, so. Are you eeping? I don't know what that means. The node points in the DB or something. Django REST framework. Oh, I'm not. I didn't. I'm in the very beginning of maybe the title. Like that, I talked about this in the beginning of the stream, but like the title is kind of misleading because I haven't spent so much time on the Django part. But like the Django is just an API external. It's not related to the graphs yet, but the way that it's gonna work is just like the graphs built on the front end with React Fiber. And I decided to build it on the imperative way because I thought it's better. I don't wanna I didn't want the state of the graph to be connected with React components. So like the React Fiber components, I thought it was like a worse idea. So I used React Fiber for the canvas, and then I studied how they build the canvas as well. But then I decided to go with their stuff, so to save time. Then I built the graph using 3JS, the imperative way, and then I have, I think, 3 Zustand stores that manage the state of the graph. So the way that I built the components is based on something they have on the documentation, I think, on the Zustand thing, which is the dependency injection pattern. So like I just follow the stuff that they do here, and doing this allows you to encapsulate the scope of the thing into one part of the application. So you have like the whole tree of the app, and then this allows you to have the state that is not going to be like based on props. It's not going to go from the top to the bottom. It's just going to be like based on context. But it allows you to create multiple instances of that state. And the reason why I did like this is so that one graph doesn't get interconnected with the other. So for example, I have one graph here in one file, in one path of the website, and then I have another one here. And then I don't want the state of this one to be connected with the state of the other one. So I have to use this dependency injection thing. And now I'm creating another component, I'm creating logic outside of this because I want to create another customization component that is outside of the graph component. Because this customization component is going to be related to more how the structure of the graph looks like and different kinds of graphs. So like you can imagine that in one situation, let me go back to removing the thing there. Like one situation, I want to display this graph here, but on the same page, I want to display this kind of graph here, for example. And I want to display both of them depending on a customization component or something like an IDE here. Like I'm trying to achieve a similar thing that VS Code achieves here with the file structure, the IDE, and the options here. And then based on the state of these trees, I decide which graph shows. But then this customization component has to be outside of the graph itself because it is more related to the more external vision. And then the way that the Django API works is that I'm going to synchronize the API with the state of the graph based on the page. So I make a request to the Django API, the Django API decides the folder structure and decides it creates the graph. And then based on whatever information I'm passing back and forth, it's gonna pass the folder structure and the graph for the front end. So this is the challenge, is like how do you synchronize both of them? Yeah, the graph, the construction of the graph, the data structure for the graph is done on the Django, is gonna be done on the Django API, but the visualization of the graph is on the front end with 3JS. And 3JS uses WebGL to render everything. And this stuff here I just got from these customizations I got from VJS, and then I made the modifications so that they work on 3JS on 3D. And then I also got the layouts from another project, I think is Ria Graph or something like that. Just these layouts here. And I also build an animation component that uses JSON. So the idea is going to be display a bunch of information. Also search for the nodes here. Oh, so now, yeah, but it's still fucking. Also, I remember the order here. I think it matters, but I don't remember really well how to do this stuff. I think I'm just gonna put in the beginning. Yeah, thanks. It has been I only did Django once, and I don't remember what I was building, so I don't know anything, pretty much. I just know roughly the structure of everything. I'm trying to remember how it works. I can chip in sometimes on Django. Nice. I don't know like what height should I put this or if it matters. I think it doesn't matter because it's just gonna be like variables. I have access to a course that I did some time ago that he explains a bunch of things from Django, so I'm probably gonna watch that again. I already started watching that again. So probably will remember, but I think for just like I'm just trying to do the superficial stuff like very easy because the most challenging thing is just connecting everything together. That's what I'm having the most challenging with. The other stuff is not that hard, I think. Because I'm not gonna do any database stuff, I think, for now. Django by default has so security measures that allow top tier security and prevent middleman efforts. Yeah, it's related to cross-site scripting, right? Like these attacks, the core headers. Django core headers is that app that allows certain IP addresses to come into your application. Oh, okay. That makes sense. Mm. So, do you think this should be good? Just start now again? You can just try it out. Maybe it's on the front end now. That's... Yeah, maybe the warning comes from the front end, not the back end. That makes more sense, I think. Because otherwise you'll be showing here. Oh, YouTube had... Okay. Oh, okay. So where should I put this stuff? You said you don't know about front end, right? Car headers whitelist. But where? I already said that I'm gonna change this later as well. I'm just using this to test because I already leaked the secret key here in the beginning. But I'm just gonna do like this for now, and then like, once it gets time to deploy, I'm gonna create environment variables. Like this here. I think the problem is probably on the front end. But it could be on the back end as well, actually. But I think it would show some message here. Maybe if it was on the back end. Yeah. GPT. Yeah, GPT said allowed origins. So let me... I think I'm just gonna ask ChatGPT. Also, saying that is the backend. Okay, man. Yeah, peace. Maybe the cars sellers has to go after. I think for this stuff, it's probably better to watch the videos again and then remember. It's better to watch the course. And maybe it's supposed to come here. Yeah. But I'm not giving the Discord anymore. I was in the past, but if you wanna message me, just do it on Twitter. It's probably better. 'Cause I think I'm gonna keep the Discord more private. Yeah, I'm not really sure. I have to think about it. Like for now is maybe it will be like this for a long time, but then I think that at some point, like maybe I'll have to. There isn't a lot of people that message me, so it's fine. But at some point, I think I'm gonna have to probably uh, like leave some stuff for private. Oh, it has to be on the back end, otherwise it wouldn't be. Yeah, it has to be on the back end. No problem. Yeah, see ya. Maybe HTTPS. Or I'm just, yeah, I have to put HTTP on the front end. Oh, maybe I should send with the request. Oh, I'm using the wrong thing there. I think that's the problem. It's not 3000. It's 5173. Red response. So now it's working. Unexpected argument. Okay, nice. So let me think. I think I might stop here, actually. And so I have to think about a bunch of stuff. The stuff that I was talking about before. This is gonna be hard. Yeah, this should be based on the. That should be based on this thing here. The ID. So let me see. Yeah, I have to print here. So I wanna see if. Or maybe it's just params. I think I'm gonna try this one. So based on whatever it is, whatever I receive here, then I do the logic to get the thing. So it's just gonna be the name of the. I think that yeah, but I have to think about. Let me think. So there's several different approaches, I think. It's gonna depend on everything else, like I said before, but because like this is gonna be the URL, it's gonna be connected to the URL here, this pattern. So I have to be careful because then obviously people can put whatever they want here. But if I make the logic on the backend based on this here, I can either make based on the. I think it has to be always based on the root of the project that I want. And then I don't allow other paths. So I have to make an if condition to check to see if the path exists or not. And if it doesn't, then it just returns I return something else, and then I do that. Like I do a 404 with the return. But I think it's always from the top of the project because I always want to send everything. I think in the beginning. So I send the whole structure of the project, the folder structure, in the first request, and yeah. But then like it's complicated because it gets into the file thing. I guess this is the problem. Like. Maybe the file structure doesn't have to be. I need to spend more time thinking about the file structure folder, not folder, the folder structure component. That's what I need to clarify. I think this thing is confusing to me. Because it would be a lot easier if I could just send all the information once, and then I just encapsulate all the logic for showing different paths on this one. But that doesn't make sense because it has to be connected with the other one. That's the problem. So this is the issue, is that when they click the file here, it's gonna change the path here. And then it's gonna make the requests again based on the path. So I have to make the logic of this function here based on the whatever path it is here. But then it doesn't make a lot of sense because I can always send all the structure, I think, but it's kind of inefficient. The other option, maybe it's better if I just look. I have to study React DOM again, and then see if I can find a better way to do this dynamic routing thing. But I think it's like a fundamental problem. I'm not gonna be able to, even if I find another way, it's gonna have the same fundamental issues. So I have to figure out the structure of everything. Like, how do I make it so that like the easiest way that I can think in my mind is I always send everything. So I always send the data structure for the whole project, regardless of what path it is, as long as it starts with a certain pattern. Or just, yeah. So as long as it starts with a certain pattern. So in this case, like if it starts with pandas, then I can do the string formatting to always send the same data, but then it would change. The only thing that would change is the state of the Zustan store that is going to determine the customization component and the ID. So that way it would be kind of isolated. But it's not very good because then every time they click a file, it's gonna send everything again. So it's not very good. It would be better if I could cache the stuff. Like I send once all the information, and then the only thing that happens when they change the path dynamically is that it just shows the file that's... But I need to access the information for the file as well. That's the problem. I'm already really tired, to be honest. I'm gonna go eat something, take a break, and continue to work on this off stream. And then probably come back some other time to continue to think about this. I think I'm gonna study more Django again, and then I'm gonna study more React. I don't think I'm gonna study React DOM. I just have to spend some time thinking about this fundamental problem here. How I'm gonna structure everything so that this state works. Maybe I think I'm gonna do some stuff on Skylidraw to make it easier to visualize everything. Then maybe next stream I just show the visualization of what I'm thinking about. Or maybe I forget about this stuff for now, and then I just worry about like designing. Maybe that's a better approach because it's another thing that I have to worry about. So like I should just focus on designing the thing first so it looks similar to this thing. Then once I have that, then I can think about the rest. Because then it's like less stuff to think about. Because the hardest part is gonna be to synchronize the state. The question is how do you design the function in a way that allows through the logic to gain flexibility despite the rigidness, let's say, that's the nature of the thing has, because it forces you to put everything on a template because of the routing. So you have to allow flexibility through the logic. And then the issue is that the biggest concern that I have is that it doesn't scale very well, because then it's gonna make it very easy for me to make mistakes later on because I'm gonna have to rethink about all this stuff every time that I change like a little thing, and that's not very good, I think. But I can't think about a better way for now. I think that it's just a fundamental problem, and it forces you to do things like that. The only thing that I can think, the only thing I can do is just structure the function in a way that it makes it less likely that I'm gonna make mistakes later. I think that's the only thing that I can do. The biggest issue is that the customization is going to be attached to this thing as well. That's the biggest problem. Because what I was thinking in my mind is that like in the customization component, I have different options that allows you to, like, for example, click, and then you get a different style of graph for the project. But then, like, if I'm gonna receive, I'm gonna have to send always the same parameter, which is gonna be the thing that I'm receiving from here. So if I'm always sending the same thing, how can I get a different graph based on the information? Maybe I can send more stuff, actually. Maybe that's the only answer. So I just send more stuff. Like on top of, I send this and other stuff. And then based on the other stuff, I determine. But the issue with this is the thing that I think it doesn't scale very well, because if I have a bunch of different types of graphs, every time I add a different type, or I can just send an option objects. I could just send an object, and then I can make. I think that's probably the answer. So I just create an object, because then the object can scale forever. Like I can put an infinite amount of things, and then all I have to do is on the back end is just to check whether or not the object has the key. If it has, then I do some logic. I think that's probably the way to go. But I'm already exhausted, so I'll come back another time. So see you then.